The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.
Welcome to the Tim Heale Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to have a chat with Dave. So Dave, if you can tell me when and where you were born, and if you can describe to me what it was like where you grew up, the schools you went to, and the education that you received. You're on parade.
All right. Thanks, Tim. Thank you for having me today. I really enjoy your podcast and what you're doing for mental health. I grew up in a town called Delaware, Ohio, which is in the center of the state of Ohio. Small farm. Well, at that point in time, it was a smaller sort of county seat, farming community. It has since become a northern suburb of Columbus, Ohio. But great place to grow up. My brother and I have a brother that's 2 years younger than I. Both grew up, played a lot of sports there. We attended the same schools. We went to an elementary school, Smith, middle school, Willis, and then Hayes Day School, which was named for one of the presidents of the United States, Rutherford B. Hayes, who was also born in Delaware, Ohio. As a kid, and I don't know about you, but as a kid, I loved reading about military history. I loved to read and would go to the library and check out tons of books on World War II history. And I think I probably read just about every book the Delaware County Public Library had on World War II. And that sort of eventually led me into the Army. But I think I'm sort of getting ahead on the story there because I know you like to dig into this piece, see a little bit more about me.
Yeah, I do. So, born in Delaware. So, what was it like? What was the area that you grew up in like? What was your house? What was your street like?
Yes. So the town's about 30,000 people. There's a small college in town. A group of friends. I was always kind of the smart kid in school, and I tried to play sports as a way to be cool and fit in with the rec crowd. So grew up playing American football, also some soccer, tennis, and baseball, and did a little bit of wrestling when there was a good coach that I liked. But
So what position did you play in American football, or did you sort of just moved around?
I played guard and linebacker. I am only 5'11" and weigh right now about 190 pounds. But I tended to make up for soccer. I played goalie, and baseball played outfield, and tennis played both singles and doubles.
Yeah, so I played a little bit of American football. I was either dropped in at a defensive end or I was a right linebacker.
Okay.
Right.
Did you grow up playing rugby?
I did. I played an awful lot of rugby. Right from being a saucepan lid in secondary school, we started there, and I played rugby on and off pretty much all my life. I was a scrum half, gobby little one as well.
They introduced
there's a big difference
rugby
between American football and rugby.
Yes.
I think because you've got all the pads on, you're probably going a little bit harder than you do with rugby, but it's a whole world of difference.
Yes,
just the way it's played. So yeah, I played both. So
I eventually for college I attended West Point, and West Point introduced rugby as an intramural sport my senior year, and I played it and I enjoyed the heck out of it.
You get ahead of yourself. We haven't got.
I know, but we're talking sports. It's okay.
Yeah, I know.
It's a lot of fun.
Let's have a look at the area that you grew up in. It's a small town, 30,000. Was it like the normal sort of leafy lanes that you get, big wide streets with sort of houses down either side and kids riding down on his bike frame newspapers at every house.
Yeah,
In the
well,
morning.
actually, that's kind of funny. I had two different newspaper routes. I had there was a local paper, the Delaware Gazette, which was delivered in the afternoon. I had a paper route with that, and then eventually took over the morning paper, which was the Columbus Dispatch, and would get up in the morning and go deliver that on my bike. The house we lived in was close enough that I walked or rode my bike to elementary, middle, and high school. And so big, like you said, lots of maple trees and oak trees. And then outside of town, it was a farmland with, once you got outside of town, there were, corn and wheat and stuff. And my dad was just here a couple of days ago, and he said that one of the big farms right on the outskirts of town just sold, and they're developing it into houses now. But it had been literally, you drive right out the city limits, and there's this huge, cornfields and stuff right outside of town. It's now going to be houses.
Wow. So I guess that's like everywhere that has to build houses because the population's getting slightly larger.
Right. One of the things my town is famous for is a horse race called the Little Brown Jug. It was for pacers, which is where you have the horse with the sulky behind it. And it was part of the Triple Crown of pacing. So it's sort of like the Kentucky Derby, but the Kentucky Derby for pacing. And that happened every September. And we would always get the Thursday out of school to go. You could go to the fair or go to the horse race or whatever. And that's still going on. So the town is famous for the Little Brown Jug.
Didn't Glenn Miller sing that? Is that where it came from?
I did not know
I'm sure
that.
he sang a song called a Little Brown Jug. I'm sure it was a Glenn Miller song.
Okay.
All
right. Well, I'll have to look that up after we get off.
Yeah. So that's probably where it was made famous.
Yeah.
So middle school, moving on up, what was your middle school like?
So there was only one middle school in town. My class was about 270 kids. And I really enjoyed English and history while in school. In 7th grade was the first time that you could play sports for the school, and we had a football team that went 5-2 that year, which was a lot of fun. And then in 8th grade, the team went 6-0-1. So was a lot of fun doing that. Not much remarkable about the middle school. Just sort of what I consider an average American middle school.
So what was your favorite subject? What was the one that you couldn't wait to get up for in the morning?
So I always loved history and I loved reading. Those two were definitely the ones that I really enjoyed.
So what was the one that you didn't want to get up for in the morning? What was the one you didn't want to go into school for?
I was a good student, and so getting me up in the morning to go to school was not tough. Later on, and sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but once I get to high school, I struggle a little bit with calculus, and so I would have to say calculus was my nemesis. Which you may find this funny, but both of my parents were math majors in college, and clearly it was not genetic. Yeah, clearly it wasn't genetic.
Terrific. So do you have any real sort of fond memories of your middle school?
The group of guys that I played football with stayed together. To fast forward a little bit into high school, we were the first team in about 20 years to have a winning record our senior season. We went 8-2, almost made the state playoffs. And we actually 20 years later got recognized. They brought us back, and we got recognized at the halftime of another football game. But that group of guys, and I'm sure is the group that you play rugby with. Some of those guys have already passed away. Some of them have had, we all went our different directions. Some of us went, one way, others went the other way. And so it was that winning season, and the fact that the community came behind us and everything was an incredibly fond memory from high school. And that group of guys that I bonded with over, because we all played together from 7th grade all the way up to senior year, was one of those special moments from growing up.
So let's look at your high school then. So did you have a high school sweetheart? Being a jock and all that.
I had several girls that I dated, but there was no sort of one special girl. Nothing too interesting there.
So your high school, your final year then, how was that? Did you pass everything with honours, or did you sort of just about get through it, or what was the end like? Obviously,
I had straight A's, and I was in line. I was in competition to be the valedictorian until I hit calculus, and I got some B's in calculus, and so that took me out of the running. Like I said, I was a great student. I ran for student council president that year. I got beat in the election. I had spent the summer between junior year at a college, taking 2 college classes. I was ready to make the transition to go to college. For teenagers in my hometown, there was not a whole lot to do. We tended to get in cars and drive up and down the main drag, which was Sandusky. It's about 2 miles from one end to the other end. There was a McDonald's at one end, and you would go to the parking lot and the McDonald's and hang out and talk to folks and maybe go in and get McDonald's. And then you get back in the car and drive around, and you try to figure out where you could go buy beer illegally and go drink alcohol and not get caught. And so that was sort of the highlight. My parents they'd let me take the car out, and my dad would always give me grief about how many miles I put on the car on a Friday night, because all we were doing was driving up and down the main drag and driving around to people's houses and stuff like that. And so but those were fond memories, and we had a good time doing it. We'd go to the movies. There were a couple movie theaters in town. Always loved going to movies and watching movies. And it was a good place to grow up.
So what was your prom like? Did you go to the prom?
I did. Prom, I went to the senior prom. I actually had to put it on. I was the co-director of the prom along with Julie, and she and I put the prom together. So it was a little bit stressful, having to organize it and decorate it and do all the work to put the prom together. But I enjoyed working with Julie, and that was a good part of the experience.
So did it all go off like clockwork?
seemed like everybody had a good time. At that point in time, I guess I had applied and got into West Point, and so for me at least, the clock was ticking before I had to report to West Point, and I knew it was not going to be a fun summer getting yelled at West Point as a plebe, and so there was a bit of a sense of urgency. The other funny thing was the running joke in my family was that there was going to be less rules at West Point than there was underneath my mom. And so my parents did the last semester sort of, the curfew got relaxed and a few of the things got relaxed when they knew, at mid-June I was going to hit and go to West Point. And so there were a few things that were relaxed. We had some great graduation parties. I remember one night, we sort of ran all over town with all my friends and went from party to party, and a bunch of them came over to my house and slept, and we got up and all ate breakfast together and had a good time, enjoying our last moments as high school seniors.
Freedom.
Yes.
So let's have a look at West Point. So that's the chappy factory for the American Army. It's a bit like our Sandhurst.
Right. Like Sandhurst, but you guys go.
Factory.
Yeah, you guys go to college first and get to enjoy college, and then you go to Sandhurst. We pull it all together at the same time. So, as we like to joke, my West Point classmates, and I tend to be closer to my West Point classmates than I was to my high school classmates, just because I bounced around the Army for 24 years, and it's tough to keep up with the high school crowd doing that. But the joke was, West Point's a great place to be from, not to be at, because there were a lot of rules at West Point. It was not the quote unquote real college experience, and a lot of discipline. I tell folks, I slept through one class my entire 4 years at West Point. It was a French class sophomore year. I ended up having to walk. So if you get punished at West Point, you get what's called first demerits, and then you get hours. You have to get dressed up in your dress uniform. You get inspected, and you have to walk back and forth basically across this big parking lot. And you can do 2 hours on a Friday and 3 hours on a Saturday in order to work your punishment off. And you want to talk about time moving slow. I am convinced that time does not move any slower than when you're marching back and forth in your uniform, these hot wool dress uniforms, with your rifle, and there's a big clock at the side of the parking lot, and you're like, it does not move.
You don't call it a drill square.
Right.
Not a drill square, is it?
Well, it was sort of it was in between the barracks, and so it was this big sort of atrium or parking lot kind of thing. But you basically walked from one, you had to do an about face at each barracks, so you could walk. I used to know how many steps it was across back and forth because I got an opportunity to walk a few hours while I was at West Point. But anyway, I got 4 hours for sleeping through French class, and had to walk back and forth for 4 hours for sleeping through French class.
So, tell us a little bit about the regime, the training regime at West Point. So you come in as a freshman in the first year, and what's the first semester like?
Yeah, so you actually come in the summer, and they do what's called cadet basic training, which is supposed to be equivalent to any Army's basic training. You introduced marching and marksmanship and how to wear your uniform properly and customs and courtesies and all those other things that happen in every professional Army. And then in mid-August, you get thrown into not only having to do that, and the plebes are which is the name for freshmen at West Point, sort of they have all these additional duties that makes the Corps cadets run. Like we had to deliver, you could send laundry out to a laundry service, but the freshmen had to deliver the laundry. We had to get up every morning and deliver the New York Times to everybody's doorstep. You had to deliver mail. There was, all these little things that makes, a military organization run, in addition to being a college. And then you had to study at night and do intramurals in the afternoon. And it was a great experience to learn time management, because you either learned how to manage your time or it became overwhelming, and maybe you opted out. The attrition rate for my class was about 30% from the day that our day, or reception day, which is the first day that you report to Point, to when we graduated, was about 30% attrition along the way. About 10% leave it the first summer, another 10% leave the first year, and you have about 10% more attrition throughout the rest of the other 3 years.
Mm. What's the main reason for people leaving? I guess the early days, people are getting homesick and that sort of thing, and it's not what they thought it was going to be.
Yeah, homesick. You also, up until you go to your first class junior year, you don't owe any service obligation to the United States Army. And so some people decided at that point in time it was time to transfer, time to go do something else. I think I would say a lot of it was folks got talked into it by their parents, and they weren't wholly invested in doing it for themselves. They like the idea of a free college. They like the idea of going to West Point and this military college, but then the actual doing it was a bit unpleasant, and it's tough. It takes a little bit of grit and perseverance to make it through and deal with all the stuff that West Point is throwing at you.
I guess it's like any army. Not everybody can do it. It's only special people that can get through it, and
Right.
Those special people will never be civvies.
Right. It does take a special
You'll only
person.
ever be a veteran.
Yeah.
So how do they work it? What branch you're going to go into? Do you pick what branch you want to go into at the beginning, or do they give you choices as you're going through? How does it work?
At the time that I went through, it was all based on class rank. So the number one person in your class got every option open to them, and the number I had actually 1,000 people graduate in my class, and the number 1,000th got whatever was left at that point in time. I decided the major professors, two guys that were really influential for me that were mentors, a guy by the name of Dave Lamb and another guy by the name of Guy LaFaro. Had both of those guys had been in the 82nd. They one had gone to Grenada, one had gone to Panama. They told great stories about being infantry in the 82nd. And so Dave Lamb, I had him as a freshman, and that by having him as a mentor and a role model, it became sort of my goal to graduate high enough that I could go infantry, and I could go to the 82nd Airborne Division, because I wanted to be a para and do that. So I had my goal and I focused in on it. And the class rank is a combination of your academic standing, your military standing, and your physical fitness. And you got grades on each of those, and they did some sort of weird algorithm and came up with your class rank.
So clearly you managed to make the cut then.
I made the cut, and I went to the 82nd as a paratrooper in 1994.
Okay. So where did you do your continuations training with the 82nd then?
Yeah,
When was your first draft?
Yeah, so the first 3 years was pretty special. We graduate from West Point, and you have to go to the infantry officers basic course, which is at used to be called Fort Benning. It's now Fort Moore, Georgia. And then I went to Ranger School, which is also at Fort Benning / Moore, and then reported in as a young second lieutenant into the 82nd. My first battalion commander was a guy by the name of Stan McChrystal. You might have heard of him. And was lucky enough to get assigned to be the platoon leader for 3rd Platoon Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment. And we spent the whole summer training up to invade Haiti. At that point in time, Haiti, there was some back and forth between President Clinton and the president of Haiti. And we eventually got to the point where we went through all the mission rehearsals and did the operations order, and we loaded up with live ammo and put our parachutes on, and we flew halfway down to jump in to Haiti. My platoon was supposed to jump into the Port-au-Prince International Airport and then walk downtown to the presidential palace, and we were going to occupy the presidential palace and then wait for further orders to go on follow-on missions.
And what happened?
Well, there was a negotiation. So President Carter and Colin Powell, well, former President Carter and Colin Powell flew down to Haiti before, like the day before the planes took off. They showed the planes taking off from Pope Air Force Base in North Carolina. And at that point in time, Cedras, who was in charge of Haiti, capitulated. I think he got a sweetheart deal to go live in another country with some money, and they replaced him. And we flew halfway down and turned around and came back. If you remember, the invasion of Panama was called Operation Just Cause, which happened in 1989. So our group got together after we didn't go, and we called it Operation Just About, because we just about went to combat.
So what happened after that then? What so you get back to North Carolina all disappointed that you didn't get to jump out, or did they make you get out for 800 feet over North Carolina?
We got out, and we kept we were prepared to jump in a second day, and then eventually the powers that be decided that other units were going to go in and do the occupation of Haiti and help do the peaceful transition of power. So we never went. We turned in our live ammo, and we were scheduled to go down to Panama. At that point in time, the Army still had the Jungle Operations Training Center in Panama. And so we loaded up and we flew down to Panama and went through 2 weeks of jungle training. And then for the rest of the couple of years, we just did training and various parachute jumps. And there was actually a huge exercise on Fort Bragg, which was called Purple Dragon, where they brought in the entire British para regiment, including the because you guys had, I think at that point in time, there were 2 jumping battalions and then the Gurkhas, and they brought in all 3 battalions, and we did this massive jump with the 3 brigades of the 82nd plus the 2 battalions of the British Paras and the Gurkhas, and to test interoperability, and that was a great exercise to be part of.
So working with the British then.
Yeah.
I'll put my hand up now. I'm not a great fan of working with the Paras. It's all right to use a sledgehammer to crack a nut, but they don't tend to think. They're not like the Royal Marines. I prefer to work with the Royal Marines. They're your thinking man's para.
Okay.
So yeah, I've had some bad experience with paras. So
Yeah.
we'll leave them alone. So what happened at the end of that draft?
At the end of that draft, I came back to Fort Benning to go to another school, the captain's school, and then was sent to Korea for a year. And part of it was I at that point in time, I wasn't sure if I was going to make a career out of the Army. Mentally, I said, "Hey, I'm gonna keep doing this till it stops being fun." And I was not entirely fired up about going to Korea for a year, but I went and I had an incredible time. I would go running every day out in the Korean villages and the state parks that were around our base that we were in. I went skiing. I traveled all over Asia. It just turned out to be a phenomenal experience, but I kind of went kicking and screaming because I didn't really want to go. I didn't really want to go to Korea.
So that was as a captain, was it?
Yeah, that was as a captain, and I unfortunately got Shanghai. I got as I reported in, a guy knew me, and he was the Division G3 or Division Operations Officer, and pulled me in to work on the division operations staff. And so I worked in this underground bunker for a year, making PowerPoint slides for the division and helping us stay as ready as possible.
But you enjoyed your time there anyway.
Yeah. It was a great time. And then the Army had a deal that you could pick your follow if you didn't command a company in Korea, and it didn't work out timeline wise for me to take a company in Korea in the year. The Army said, hey, you can pick whatever assignment you want on the back end. And so I picked to go back to the 82nd Airborne Division, and which doesn't usually happen in the U.S. Army. I got to go back to the same regiment that I was in before. I shifted one battalion over. I had been in 2nd Battalion. I went to 3rd Battalion. And within, I think it was 6 weeks of landing back in the United States, the battalion got alerted to deploy to Kosovo. And we went into Kosovo in late August, early September. The air war was like June of '99. And so August or September, we came in and replaced the battalion that had been part of Task Force Hawk in Albania. We're in that point in time it was the town was Urošević or Ferazaj. Urošević if you were Serb, Ferazaj if you were Kosovo Albanian. And we set up there, which was west of Bondsteel, which was the big U.S. base. I think you were probably up in Pristina, right?
I was at Pristina. Yeah, I was at I was with 19 Brigade at the time. We were at the old university building.
Okay.
My role at the time was psychological operations. Our main focus was the village of Gračanica, which was a Serb enclave, and Kosovo probably and to try and provide safe routes for them and one thing and another. But I got to travel around an awful lot. So I was in, I came down to Bondsteel quite regular, working with I think with Forpog guys there, and went out to Jelani on a couple of occasions. And then I worked with the Italians, the Spanish, the French, the Russians. It's the only place I didn't enjoy lunch. The Russians. Horrible. I don't know how those guys eat it every day. Disgusting stuff. Yeah, no fun at all there. So I got to travel around, and I was there for from November, back end of November '99 through to beginning of September 2000. So I did pretty much almost a year there. Had a good time. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. You and I might have crossed paths at that point in time.
You never know.
Right.
certainly out there at the same time.
One of the more interesting
So what
things that I
happened
did.
after Kosovo?
So got done with Kosovo, came back, took company command. I had Charlie Company 304, and really had a great time as a company commander, because I was.
Is that as a major or a captain?
Back at the same place captain of the U.S. company on an independent company deployment to Fort Pickett, Virginia. The company got selected to go to Argentina as part of a Southcom exercise. We trained up another unit to go to Kosovo, and then 9/11 happened. And 9/11 happened. I was at the tail end of my company command. I had 9/11 happen, and I did about 2 more months of company command, and then I went to Bosnia as an individual tasking to work in S4 headquarters, and so was there in Sarajevo at Butner, and got to go all around the country. We did some operations against the PIFWICs, the people formerly indicted for war crimes. Did some counterterrorism operations. It was really a neat experience in the post 9/11 environment. And then when that was done, I got asked to go to the 101st Airborne Division, which is at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and rolled right into the invasion of Iraq in 2003.
I bet that hurt, didn't it?
Well, for a guy that I know you went to Northern Ireland early in your time in the Army, so you sort of got that combat experience in early. For a guy that almost did the invasion of Haiti, it was another 8-9 years until I actually went to quote unquote combat in the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And so be careful what you wish for, right? Because I got to do way too much combat and ended up doing almost 41 months in Iraq and Afghanistan over a couple different tours. So be careful what you wish for.
Absolutely. So how was Iraq for you? What was your role? Were you company commander at that stage?
No, I was actually aide-de-camp to the commanding general of the 101st, which was a guy by the name of Dave Petraeus. And so I did the invasion with Petraeus from Kuwait all the way up to Mosul. I'd worked with him in Bosnia as well, and then he was the guy that took me to Fort Campbell. So I got to see a lot and do a lot.
Bag carrier.
I was his bag carrier or horse holder, whatever term.
Clean his boots, press his kit.
Actually, we had an enlisted aide that took care of that. I had to make sure that he was on time and the schedule and anything else that he wanted to do was taken care of. But it was a great experience. I thoroughly enjoyed the guy, working for the guy. Best boss that I ever worked for. I've been quoted as saying that Petraeus is the most competitive person on the planet. I still believe that. My ex-wife would chime in whenever I would tell that story and say, "Well, you're the second most competitive guy on the planet." And so it was a good relationship. I still stay in touch with him. He's a great mentor, great friend, and it was one of those good experiences. I'm sure you have one of those mentors that you got to work with that you still think back fondly about.
Yeah. So, Afghan then. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit
So
about your tour in Afghanistan. Where did you
so
go?
I was a battalion commander for. I went to Iraq 2 more times as a battalion S3 operations officer, and then a brigade operations officer, and then was selected to be a company command or battalion commander of 3rd Battalion 187, which is known as the Iron Rakkasans. We were part of the surge into Afghanistan, and we went to Southeast Afghanistan, first to a province called Paktika province. And we moved during the middle of the tour. They brought in another brigade, and so we moved one province to the west. And my battalion worked for the Polish brigade there in Ghazni province, the second half of the tour. I don't know what you thought, but I thought the Afghans. I ended up with better relationships with the Afghans that I worked with than the Iraqis that I worked with. The Iraqis were more organized than the Afghans, but I had better relationships with the Afghans. I also found that the Taliban would fight longer and harder than the Iraqis that I fought in Iraq. The Iraqis would sort of blow up an IED, shoot at you a few rounds, and then skedaddle. The Afghans or the Taliban would hook and jab, would get in a firefight with you until you brought in either a fast mover or a helicopter, and then they'd break contact.
Yeah, I found that. Yeah, they're a tough old bunch, the Afghans. Really tough bunch.
They are. Yeah.
But it's a fascinating country. I found
Yeah.
Afghanistan a lot more fascinating than I did Iraq.
Yes.
I have quite a bit of time and sympathy for the Afghans, particularly now, and after what happened. It's a bloody tragedy, whichever way you look at it.
Beautiful.
And it was needless. That's the thing. It was needless. They shouldn't have done it. Anyway, it's happened, and unfortunately, the women and girls of Afghanistan are the ones that are really suffering.
Yeah.
So what happened next? Where did you end up after Afghan?
So I ended up. I eventually came back to Fort Benning, now called Fort Moore. I was lucky enough to be selected for brigade command, and I was selected to be the commander of the Airborne and Ranger Training Brigade. And so for 2 years, I ran both our airborne school and our Ranger school, and had the opportunity to do that. While I was in charge of the Ranger school, we did the gender integration of Ranger schools. So the first women came to Ranger school, 19 women came, and 3 graduated. Since then, there's been another 114 women that graduated from Ranger school. You have about 1,500 guys that graduate every year as well. But it's been it was an incredibly tough experience, but I'm proud of how the organization responded to it, worked through it, and it is still a success story for the U.S. Army with our gender integration.
Yeah, I think we've pretty much got it with ours as well. I think the Afghan tours for us particularly, because although they weren't infantry as such, we had female medics going out with infantry.
Yeah.
And I think that's seeing how they work, et cetera, has made the integration of women into the infantry more acceptable. And I think it takes a special sort of woman anyway to want to do it.
Yeah. Well, one of the organizations that we looked at as we were getting ready to do the first class with both men and women in Ranger School was we looked at the Canadian infantry, who had been integrated since '89, and called on them and listened to their experiences and saw what they had done. I agree with you. About Afghanistan and Iraq. The combat was a 360-degree experience. I know at one point in time there had been 66 American women killed in Afghanistan, and so the women were fighting right alongside the men. I violated policy because at that point in time you weren't supposed to have women down in infantry companies, but I made sure each of my infantry companies, who were all stationed 30 to 40 miles apart in various parts of Afghanistan, all had 2 women assigned to them, whether they were cooks or medics or intel or whatever job that they were in. They were part of that rifle company because it gave them the capability to search women when they went on to objectives in Afghan society.
Absolutely. I mean, and that worked very well. I know it worked quite well in our patrols. So, So brigade commander, what happened next?
Yeah. Well, so as I came out of brigade command, I did one more year in the Army, and then decided to make the transition. I'd gone through a divorce. I'd seen plenty of combat. My daughter is here in Columbus, Georgia, and I decided that I didn't want to keep moving around for the Army, and wanted to stay here and be a father and help raise her. And so at that point in time, I started working for another company. And then eventually it led to 2020 when I founded my own company, the Fivecoat Consulting Group. We do executive coaching, some business consulting, and leadership training. And I've been running my own company for the last 3 years.
I guess you set it up just as you're going into lockdown.
Right.
How
right.
did that affect?
I would not recommend standing up your own company on the cusp of COVID. I have a newfound respect for small business owners, and how if you don't have customers coming in the front door, you don't keep the lights on. I went a whole quarter with a client. And you just got to be out there hustling and trying to make it happen, and making sales and talk to people and trying to help them out, whether it's through any facet of my business. I think I know one of the things that I think would be interesting to talk about is mental health during transition, and I know that's one of your themes, and I have some ideas on it. I don't know they're entirely right, but after 5 years of making the transition out of the Army and into now the corporate world and running my own company, I think there's some things that I tell folks that are getting ready to go through this adventure.
Yeah, what I found for me personally, I finished in April 2018. It wasn't until probably 21 that it finally hit me that I was having one or two little issues. I mean, there nothing major, but that's when everything caught up with me. And that's when I went to see my doctor, and he was going to prescribe me antidepressants, and signposted me on to the old psychologist and that. So I declined the drugs and went to see the psychologist. Unfortunately for me, they didn't understand the military mindset and what I'd been through and stuff like that. So I had about 4 or 5 chats with them, and they didn't really help. And it wasn't until I was having a chat with some mates about it that I was able to square it all away. But it doesn't really hit you until a couple of 3 years after you leave, because when you're in it, it's kind of full on. I spent 8 years as a welfare officer. My last 8 years as a welfare officer in London Central Garrison, looking after young blokes and musicians. So, yeah, having done all the courses, I recognised that something wasn't right, so I did something about it. And for me, it worked. It was good. I managed to square myself away by chatting with peers, and I think that's a good way about doing it.
Well,
not to say that the civilians weren't good at what they did, but they just don't understand what you've been through, and I think that was a bit of an issue.
Yeah.
But
well,
yeah,
and there's a
it all
couple
came
of
good.
big. Yeah. Well, there's from my experience, there's a lot of things going on. First off, you're transitioning out of the Army, something at least that was part of my life for 27 years, 28 years. And so you're transitioning out of that. You're starting a new job. You're trying to learn the corporate side. For me, I was also going through a divorce at that point in time. So a lot of stuff going on. The thing that I talk to a lot of folks about is, hey, you've got to come to grips with what your identity is going to be, because your identity was wrapped up in this military thing for X number of years, and that's part of you, and that's okay. But I think you've probably seen the guys that are still on Facebook talking about how reliving their fondest memories of the Army, and they haven't moved forward. And so I talk to my peers that are getting out about, hey, you got to do some really hard work on what your new identity is going to be. And whether you spend some time thinking about what your personal purpose is going to be, or just your purpose. I think that's super helpful. Another thing that was super helpful for me was, as I transitioned identities, I'd always loved the physical fitness aspect of the Army. And to me, I was like, hey, I'm a pro athlete. I get paid, to work out because I'm part of the Army. But for me, that was a huge thing in helping me transition identities. Was I got even more into physical fitness. I competed in triathlons. I'm now doing a bunch of biking, as you can see from the bikes in the back. And for me, that helped me reestablish a new identity as just Dave the athlete, not Dave the Army guy. As I started to transition and figure out what's next. I don't know if that helped you at all. I don't know if you got into physical fitness as you transitioned or not.
Actually, I came out broken.
Okay.
6 months before I was due to leave, I ended up in hospital, and when I had my pre-release medical, because I knew the doctor well, she said, "Tim, if you weren't leaving, you would be." so I wouldn't have been able to stay in anyway. I'd have had to apply for my own job, and also it's crazy, but so I was broken when I came out. So for me, physical activity is very minimal. I can just about manage to get out of bed in the morning and then take them up for a walk. Some days I struggle to get out of bed in the mornings, but it's something you live with. You something you cope with, and when it gets too much, just pop a few pills. The old pink pills, proof and works wonders.
Yeah. I think you just saw my mutt walk through. She's
a big old boy.
Yeah, she's a 60 pounds. I don't know how many that is, but she's a boxer lab hound dog mix that I got also at the beginning of COVID. I was like, I better get a dog now or I'll never get one.
Yeah, so we got the RT the ship's cat, who's very famous, being rescued one thing and another, which is a long story. and we just got the hound of Heale Manor, Hudson, who's a little border terrier, and he's a proper terror.
Nice. And dogs are good too, as folks thinking about making transitions. It's nice. She gets me out a couple times a day to walk around the block, and we've been good for each other. She was a rescue, was not treated well before I got her, and is probably the most timid dog I've ever been around. But we've both good for each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So bring us right up to date. So what are you at the moment? How's the business going?
Business is going really well. I tend to have about 5 executive coaching clients at any point in time. I can always take on more. One of my COVID projects was I wrote a book called Grow Your Grit about how to develop your grit and perseverance. That continues to sell well. It's out on Amazon and a couple other sites. And I do some business consulting where a company asked me to, I don't know what you guys call it, but the Army calls it the military decision-making process. I translated it into corporate speak. It is the corporate decision-making process. And this company likes me to come in and act as their facilitator as they're developing strategic plans. And I love doing that. It's the same stuff I did as a battalion or brigade operations officer, helping them sort through and figure out what the best plan is and how to pull it all together.
Yeah, I think we call it a 7-question estimate.
Okay.
So it's set 7 questions and it's an estimate, and who's doing what, when, and where, and how, and what do you want to achieve at the end of it. So that's an estimate, basically. That's the way that we look at it.
Okay.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So I think that brings us to right up to date. So how can people get hold of your book? Just
the book's on Amazon. That's probably the easiest place to get it. I have my own website, which is www.thefivecoatconsultgroup.com. They can my email's on there. They can email me or get in touch with me that way. I'm also on LinkedIn. They can find me there too. I blog once a week, like we talked about before. This year, I'm doing blog once a month. I do an update on the war in Ukraine, and every other blog post is on World War II European theater of operations leaders or leadership topics. And today, for instance, I put one out on Major John Howard and the Oxen Bucks landing at Pegasus Bridge as we head towards June 6th.
Yeah. And Lord Lovett came along with, what's his name, Millen, one of his
playing the bagpipes, and then you also had Pine Coffin was the guy's last name was it was Lieutenant Colonel Richard Pine Coffin was one of the first elements to reach the bridge and reinforce Howard and the Oxen Bucks there.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't know if you've been. Have you been there to the Pegasus Museum and Bridge?
Yeah, a couple of times actually.
It is amazing how it's amazing how close they landed the horses.
Sailed across the channel to Weestrum and spent a week in Weestrum, and we did all the battlefields and the museums and everything around there. So yeah, know it quite well.
Nice.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you for having me, Tim, and thanks for what you're doing to help the mental health of folks.
That's an absolute pleasure.
The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.